Apache HTTP virtual hosts. Now, Apache is a web server and it is used to create the web servers. And for creating the web server, we need HTTPD package in our Linux system. So when you install the package and start the service, it will start the web server. And will start the web server with the default configuration. And the default configuration says that you need first, it says that first you have to configure the main configuration file for the server name, because the server name is not mentioned in that configuration file, and it will give a warning there. So when we start the service, so it will give a warning like this server name is not identified and is using the current server as a server name. So we have to mention the server name in the server name directive in the main configuration file, so to avoid that error. Now remember, when you mention the name, you need DNS. So for HTTP server to work, for Apache server to work properly, we need DNS server. We need DNS server to be configured. Okay, now default website is running and can be accessible from client. So default website is running and can be accessible from the client, and the default website does not have any pages, any web pages. And the default document root directory does not contain any pages. That means this is a directory where you have to put your all content of your website. All content, that means the content will start from your home page, and with the home page then you will put your other pages, other links, other images, movies, whatever videos, whatever you have, you put it on those in this directory, and it will be accessible from the client. So by default, site will show on the welcome test page because there is no file available in the HTML directory. So we have to put our web content into that directory so that our website can work. Now web content, that means all the files required to create the website. So web developer will create the site for you. It gives you all the files required and images, whatever they need. And the home page will be important because the home page is the page which will access first. So the home page will be accessed first. So home page name must be index.html. So we have to make sure that the home page name will be index.html. So whenever anyone access this server, it will access the index.html and it will see the index.html file. And from that index.html home page file, it can go any site, any page. Like on those page it will be, and on that page the web developer will configure the links and all that. So it will go to any sites and all that. For example, you have seen any site. For example, this is our site. So this is the home page. This is the first page we access. Now we have different links here. Now these all links, all pages, everything is stored in that single directory. And you can see here in the URL the directory name. This is the directory where all files are located. So when I click on something, it will open the other page, and that page and this page is also under the same directory. And you can see the path here. This is under login and that login is under the same directory. So the pages which we access, so when we access any site, we see the first home page, and after that home page we see different links. So when we click on those links, we will open other pages in that same directory. Now you see I am redirected to some other directory, but it remains in the main directory. So this directory for the site is the document root directory. So this is how it works. So our job is to provide the index.html, the home page. So first the web hoster, like we are the website hosting party, so we do what? We have to provide the first home page, and the page name must be index.html. So by default it accesses index.html file. So by default Our web server, our Apache server, when it starts, it looks for the index.html file to present. So it publishes the index.html file, and then from that index.html file, from that home page, users can access any other pages, any other links. That depend on the website, that how the website is developed. So we have created this. So this is my server, and I have already installed the Apache. If we check the status, so the package name is HTTPD, the service name is also HTTPD. So the service is running, and it is running, and the server is running, and I have already created one home page file under document root directory, that is under where www.html, and that home page file name is index.html. I have created it for the testing purpose. I have not added anything here. I have just added a single text line like this. I have just added this. This is my default website. I have not done anything else. But we could have create a program. We could have a design HTML code. We could have put a HTML code to design a page and all that. So we can do that if you want to make a good page. And this can be accessed from this
Yes, sir.
So on the client side, I will open the browser first, and I'll show you the page which I have added into that HTML directory. So when I access http:// and I will put the server name, I can put the name also because the DNS is working. So when I do this, I see this page, and it is normal text I have added, so it is showing as a normal text. So it is showing as a normal text here. But if we have developed the page, then it will show according to the what we have developed. For example, I will put some HTML coding there to make this page look good. So I will do what? I will put some HTML coding here in this page. So I will open this index.html, and so HTML codings will start like this. They have these tags HTML. It starts from here. It is HTML open, and then you have to close HTML. It is like this. That means this one, the first it is open the tag, and then it is close the tag. In between you put all your different programs. Okay, so in between I will put one more tag, let's say title. Now the title which I give, it will show in the page here, in the title page. Like for example, when you see access here, it is showing here Mozilla Firefox. Here you will see the title, page title, which we will put here. So I will put title here like my website. Then I will close the title. So any tag which you open in this HTML coding, you have to close it. Now I will put what? Header information. So header will be, let's say this is testing site. Now header, okay, header I want to put it into center of the page. So I will put one more tag, center, and I want to put it a big font. I will give H1. Okay, so which I have opened header, so I will close header. Then I have opened center, so I will close center. Then also I have opened H1, so I will close H1 also. Now I will put body, and for body I will put this line. And then body also I want it into the center, so I will put it into center and a little small than the first font. Then it will close the font, then I will close center, then I will close body. And HTML is already closed. Or we can put color also. So in the body I will put color, background color is equal to, let's say, I will go with a green color. Okay, this is a small coding I did. I saved the page. Let's see here, and I will refresh here. Now it is looking like this. So this is like a small coding I did. Here now you see my website is the title, this is the header, and this is the body, and this is background color. So we have different tags there. We can add, we can design our web page, whatever. So this is actually the job of administrators, the website developer who develop the sites. Now our job is to publish these pages. That means we have to make sure that index.html will be the home page, and rest of the pages, all the rest of the pages must be available and accessible by the Apache, and it must be available on that document root directory. They must be accessible by the Apache also. You have to make sure that it must be accessible by the Apache, and also SE Linux is allowing it. Remember, SE Linux will not allow any pages which is not having a proper content label. The label for the content will be HTML. The label must be this HTTPD sys content T. If your label is not this, then the HTML, this SE Linux will not allow the page to be accessed by the Apache from remote location. So clients will not able to access the page. So we have to make sure that the SE Linux label is also okay, properly set, otherwise it will not be accessible. So this is what the default website, and this is what the only site we have by default. Now if we need only one site, then it is okay, and we can configure this and we can use this website for our local use or whatever. Now if we want to configure multiple sites, for example, we are the website hosting company. We want to host multiple sites for different companies. That means they will have a different domain name, they will have a different website, totally manage different pages. So for them also we can do what? We can host sites for them. We can create virtual host. So basically we have a single host here, single server, physical server, but in the single server we can create multiple virtual hosts, virtual sites. When we say virtual host, that means we are talking about virtual sites. So they could be a different domain name, different machine name, whatever. But remember, when you are talking about names, then you have to have a DNS. Whatever domain name you want to create, the site for the domain name, whatever, you have to resolve that. So that resolution job will be done by the DNS. So whether you create the site for example.com, you create the site for saipali.com, you create the site for any other domain, that must be resolved. Our server will give access by the for those who's accessing those sites, but those clients must be resolve those names. They have to resolve it, and resolution job is totally done by the DNS. So for this, configuring the multiple host, virtual host, we have to configure the DNS properly. Now before going into that, I will show you the brief information about the main configuration file and what are the settings we have in main configuration file, what are the important settings of the main configuration file we have. So I'll give you the brief information, then I'll show you how we can create the virtual host. So the main configuration file is here under etc httpd. Under the conf directory we have the httpd.conf. This is our main configuration file. So when we open the file, it starts with the main, lots of comments. These comments are just an information so that we can you can understand what that means. Now you should read these comments. Basically it is a best way for some informations. Now the next setting, the first setting you have here is setting the server root directory. It is configuring the server root directory here. It is setting the server root directory. That means for all the configuration related files will be available here under this directory. That means Apache server and the Apache user cannot go outside this directory. It will do only in this directory. This will be his root directory. So root directory will be the final directory for anything. So it will not go any other way in any other directories under the etc. It will only access the directories and files and whatever from this server root directory. So here it is setting the root directory for the Apache. Now when we go down here, so it says that listen on port number 80. This is the default one, and by default HTTP port number is 80. So it is going to listen on this port. If we want to change, then also we can change. By default it will listen on the all IP. That means all the IPs like 0.0.0. It is going to listen on 0.0.0. So if you check here, if we check right now the service is running. So when you check and next state, and it is the TCP. So I say I want to check the TCP ports, and I don't want to see all. So I will grab port 80 because HTTP is port 80. So you can see it is actually listening on all ports. All IP, that means default IP. So if you want to listen, if you want your server listen on a particular IP or a particular port, then you can change this option. You can change it like this. You can put the IP which you want it to listen and the port which you want to listen. Now this is the global setting. This is, we can say it is a global setting, but we can have different virtual hosts also. That is what we are going to configure, and those virtual hosts will be configured as this tag. It is like a HTML coding which we have seen right now, just right now, that the page which I create, it is just like a HTML tag. So this is the way we have a configuration here in this configuration file also. So the virtual host which we create, it will be created by this tag. Now these tags, that means those virtual hosts can have different IPs and also can have different port numbers to listen. Unless if you don't give, then it will use this global directory. That means it will use this directory by default. If we mention another thing in these different virtual hosts, then it will go for that. And if you don't mention any virtual host, then it will go for this default one. Right now we don't have any virtual host, so it is listing on all IP and on this port. Then when we go down, so it says that include all the files from this conf.modules.d directory. All the configuration files which ends on .conf. Name could be any, and the name could be any, but the extension, the ending, the file name must end on this .conf. So if you check that directory, you have this directory, and in that directory you have all the files ending on .conf. Now these files indicates that these files have a setting that which modules should be loaded and which modules should not be loaded. So the files here says that which module should be loaded. These are on default. So we want, then we can enable some modules and we can disable some modules. So for anything, for example, like for CGI scripts, these are programming scripts. So if your website developer has used these CGI scripts, so it is going to load first the module, then it can use that CGI scripts. So in that configuration file, when you check, it has an information about the scripts to load. So it says that this module will be loaded for CGI PMP, worker event, for events, and for pre-forks. So these are the modules which will be loaded. So just like it is having other configurations also for other modules. So the main configuration file is saying that all the files which has this any name here and ending on the .conf, load all the files from there. So these all files will be loaded here. Now if we want to create our file, then we can also create with any name and we can end with the .conf. And if you want, then your file must be loaded first. Then you have to make sure that it will be read first, because it is going to be read by the sequence, numerical or alphanumerical sequence. Like if you give file, if your file name start with A, so it will be loaded after 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and then A. And if your file name starts with 0, then your file will loaded 1 first time. File name is 1, it will loaded after 0. File number 2 will loaded after 1, and it will goes like this. And file number B, file name which starts with B, it will loaded after A. So it is like that. So this configuration setting is saying that load all the conf file from the module directory, and it says that which file should be loaded, which modules should be loaded or which module should not be loaded. And here it is defining the user Apache and group Apache, so that any file which we want to which we want to publish from our HTTP server, then that file must have the read permission, at least read permission to this Apache user or group. And if this user and group does not have at least read permission, then those pages will not be accessible. Now here we have main server configuration, and here what? First it is defining the server admin, and this is the server admin's email address. By default it is root at localhost. That means the current host is the server, and the root of the current host is the server admin. If we want to change the email address, then we can change it to any other email address, like any name at gmail.com, hotmail.com, whatever. So this is going to be any problem. If this server gets any problem, then it will send error or something to this mail. Then here the name is defined for the server. This directory is not configured by default. So if first time when you start the service, you will get the warning, an error related to this, that there is no server name defined, and it is going to use the current machine server name as a server name. So we have to define this. So for running the default site, I have defined this, that server name is this, and this is my server name. Now the next thing is this. The next thing is this directory tag, or we can say directory. Now you see here it is like an HTML code, and you can see it is opening here and it is closing here, and in between it has the other options. Now in Apache server, if we want to share any directory, remember, if we want to share any directory, then we need this directory tag for that directory, and we need some compulsory settings for that. So suppose we want to share any directory, that means we have the default document root directory, which is where www HTML. This is the default document root directory where we put all the web content. Now to web server, to Apache server, to access this directory and to share this directory in a main configuration file, or configuration file, we must have the directory tag for it. Directory tag open and directory tag close, and we need some option in that. Otherwise you will not able to share that directory. Now what is this here? How it is done here? So the directory tag will open here and with the path of that directory. Now here it is saying about slash. Now slash is what? The root directory. Now root directory is already defined on the first line, and the first line says that the root directory is etc under etc httpd. In the first line of main configuration file, the root directory is this, where we have all the configuration files. So it is defined there. Now what it is defining here? It is defining the root directory here, and it is defining the tag for the root directory. And what it is defining here? That required all denied. That means no one can access that directory from the web server. Like if any client access from here, from the client side, they will never get the access of that root directory. It is to secure our configuration directory. It is to secure our configuration directory so that anyone, and suppose any hacker try to get the access and try some tools to get the access, so they cannot get the access of the main main configuration directory. So it is denying here. It is denying all to access the directory. Now when you go down here, so you will see here it is defining the document root directory. And when it is defining the document root directory here, it will not be published until we share it, until we have a directory syntax. And the directory syntax is here for that HTML directory. It is opening here and it is closing here. But before that, you have one more directory tag. You have one more directory tag for var www, directly for var www. And under the var www, we have this HTML, but it is having this already there, var www. And what option is saying? It is saying that required all granted. So basically it is saying that any directory, any file from this var www can be accessible from the website. Like from web server, from client side, anyone can access this directory and all the content of this directory. Now all the content of this directory is included this directory also, HTML directory also. So we don't need a different tag for the HTML directory, but we have the different tag for HTML directory. Now why we have different tags? So that we can have other options here. Here we don't have other option, we have only that allow overrid, but it is none, and we have required all granted, and that's it. Other options are not there. So we want to have some other option for this specific directory, so it is added this extra directory syntax here. Now what it is saying here, so it is starting from here, and when you go down, so the first it says options. So in between this directory tag, you can put some options and configuration for different features. The first option is there. First is options. Now options. So we have different options to add it. Now first, either we can go for none, no options, or we can go for all options, or we can go separate options. Like we can have indexes, we can have include option, we can have follow symlinks, we can have symlinks of owner match, we can have execute CGI, we can have multi-views. So we can have these different options. What these different options do? First option, indexes. Indexes option is actually listing. It gives you the right to list the directory. Directory listing right. Now this is not secure. This indexes option is not secure for your site. It is actually allowing you to list the directory content. List the directory content, that means whenever you access the site, you see I have not mentioned any page here. If you see, I have only mentioned the name or IP of the server. So it shows me by default the home page. But when you have a listing option, when you have a listing permission, then you can even see other files inside the directory, inside that particular directory. Now other files means what? What I have said, that in the document root directory you will put all your files, all your web page files. So all your files will be there. That means your important files which you don't want to see also be there. For example, suppose this site is like, when you access the site, it will ask you for authentication. It will ask you to provide username and password. And when you give username and password, it will match the username and password with some other file which is also with our website. Like the file is also located in the same directory. That means when you authenticate yourself, so for authenticating allowed users files, username and password are also in the same HTML directory. So if anyone can list this directory with this option, so it can see that what are the files are in, what are the different files inside this directory. So it can see all the files, and when it sees all the files, then it can read the files. That means it can access the files. So it can see that what are the usernames and passwords. So if you give this option, then what the attackers, the hackers can run attack. It is called directory listing attack. It is called directory listing attack, and they can do the directory listing attack, and they can access their websites, where they can access the content, the whole content of your websites. Now if you don't want, then you have to remove this option. Now why this option is available here in this default site? Because the site, when it is in under development, so developer may need some time to access those files. They need some time to list those files, and they need some time to list those files from remote locations also. So we put these index options by default here, so that when the server is the site is under developed. Now when it is fully developed, then make sure that we remove this option. If mistakenly we leave this option there, then it is the misconfiguration, and attackers use these misconfigurations. Next, other options are to include, like we include some other configuration files with this option. Then we can use this symlink also. We can say follow symlinks. Follow symlinks option helps me to, suppose I have one directory where I have lots of files, and that directory is suppose under MNT. Suppose I have one directory under MNT, or suppose anywhere else, and that directory data is 10 GB. Suppose these are videos. Now I want to publish that 10 GB data, 10 GB videos on my website. So what I can do, I can copy that directory under this document root directory. Now when I copy, so what it will be, it will become 20 GB. That means it will use the space of my hard disk, and it will create more 10 GB data in this HTML directory. Now if I don't want to do that, then what I can do, instead of copying the whole directory there, I can create a link for that directory. So I can create what, soft link, so that what, when anybody clicks on that link, it will open this directory from my original location. Now by default it will not allow to have a link, but if you want to have a links, then you can add this option. So when you put any links in that document root directory, then it will also be accessible. You can also put this symlinks with owner smash. That means if the accessible owner, the user which is accessing this link is the owner of that link, then only it can access. Otherwise other users cannot access other users link. So you can put this also. Then you can put this executes CGIs. CGIs are the scripts to run. So when your site supports the CGI scripts, if the developer use the CGI scripts and they want to run those CGI scripts, then you can add this option also. Then there is other option called multi-views also. So if you want, then you can use this option also. Now the next is what? Allow override. And you see before also that allow override is always none. Now this can be also none and all. It can be also all, or it can be also none. Now mostly you see this none. Now what separate options we have here? So in allow override option we can have file info, we can have auth config, and we can have limit also. Now what is the meaning of this? First, file info will show the file information. It will have a file information. Auth config can set the configuration, authentication configuration for your site, for that document root directory. And that document root directory, that means your site. That means you can allow, you can configure authentication for your site. That means you can configure that who can access this site. Who can access the site on this directory, the site which is configured on this directory. So who can access that directory we can configure by using this auth config option. And this limit option can limit, it will allow you to limit the request and the reply. Request and the reply, when you have a web server, so when client sends the request to get the web page, so it is the client send the get request. So for web servers we have different type of request. We have actually get and post request. Get request comes from the client when it wants to access the web page, and post request come from the clients when the client try to post something. Like for example, you try to create an account somewhere in some site, so you put your informations on the page and you press submit. That means you are doing what? You are submitting the page. You are doing post request. So get and post requests are there for the websites. So any website, any web page will have the get and post requests. And also we have header request also. So sometimes you just want to get the header. Now those requests we can limit. We can limit that how many get requests can be accepted and how many post requests can be accepted. So that we can do by using this limit option. Now when you use these options, then that means what? Suppose I use this auth config. That means I want to allow some users only. I don't want to allow everyone. So who do I want to allow? That is not configured here. Here we give only what? Auth config. Here except this none option we give only auth config. And suppose I mention the limit. So how many post, how many get request I want to allow, that I don't configure here. Here I will give only limit. So here we only mention the limit. We don't mention other options. Now the other option, for the other options, our web server will look for this file. This file name is .htaccess. This is the name, it is configured, it is set. We can change the name. I will show you where you can change the name. But this is named the default. This is the default name is configured. So suppose I set auth config. So I'm saying that only some particular users are allowed to access this site. So who is those users and what are the passwords of those users? What are the names of those users? We will configure all those things under this file, under this .htaccess file. So when you give any option here, allow this override option, allow override option, when you mention any option here, either file info, auth config or limit, then our web server will do what? It will try to find this htaccess file under the directory. So it will try to find under the same directory, it will try to find what? This .htaccess file. and that is why it is hidden file. You see it is starting with the dot. That means this file will remain hidden. So if any user try to access the website, it will not able to see this file. It will remain hidden. In this file it will mention, we will mention that who is going to be accessed and what are the usernames and what are the passwords, how many get requests, how many post requests I want to allow. So whenever we give a allow override option, any of this option, we have to create this file also, and in that file we have to mention the other settings. Then finally the important setting is here, require. That means who you want to allow, this server, this site to be accessed. So if you say all, that means all will be granted or denied. So whether you want to allow or deny, you can set here. Like for example here it is set denied, required, all, denied, or you can set required, all, granted. So here it is set required, all, granted. Now you can configure other way also, like you want to allow only some network or only your network, then you can mention the network IP. You can mention the domain name also, like you want to access, only allow access for particular domain like example.com, so you can mention example.com, so it will be only accessed by the example.com. Now these are the options will be under the directory syntax, like when the directory open and directory close, so you can have these other options. So this is the directory syntax, and this is ending here, this is closing here. Then the other configurations are also there. You can see it is the module tag here. Now this tag is having this module, it is loading dir module, and here it is setting the directory index. Now this setting says that what is the name for your home page file. Remember it is setting what? Index.html. That is why always our server try to access the index.html as a home page file. Now if you want to have another file, like if you want your home page file name could be any other name, then you can use here, you can change the setting from here. Then from here it is trying to secure the .ht files. .ht files, that means this .htaccess file that can contain the important information, can also have the .ht passwd file which can contain the password information about users who can access the site when we put the allow override option. So this tag is to secure those ht files. What it says here, files .ht star, that means any .ht file will not be allowed, required, all, deny. So nobody from the website cannot access any file which starts from .ht. Then here it is setting the log. Log for the default site will be error log, and this is for the log level which is one. This is setting the format for the log, and this is what for the access log. So anybody who access the sites, you will see the log, it will generate the log, and you see access logs are combined, so it will not do the separate log for separate users. And here it is loading the script alias also for the scripts, and this is the directory for the scripts where we can put the scripts, CGI scripts, so developer can put the CGI scripts there. So these are the important settings we have in this main configuration file. Rest of the settings are for the file type, like what are the type of files it supports, our web server, and for the file type it is using this magic file from the conf directory. And then the settings are ending here, and also it is last, in the last line it is saying include optional, which is including this directory, all the conf files. That is also, it is saying that load all the conf file from this directory. and it is loading this main configuration, not this directory, it is what, conf d directory. This is our main configuration file. So it is also loading the all the files from this conf.d directory, where we have additional configuration files, where we have this welcome.conf file, which is responsible for loading the test page. So this is the default, this is the main configuration file, and these are the default some settings. Now we know what is the default configuration file and what the configurations we have. Now we can go for configuring the virtual host. So that is what for the single site, but if suppose we want to configure multiple sites, multiple virtual sites, then we can go for virtual host. So virtual host do what? It allows a single HTTPD server to serve content for multiple domains. Now based on either the IP address or of the server that was connected to, the host name requested by the client in the HTTP request, or a combination of both, HTTP can use the different configuration settings, including a different root directory. So when we configure the virtual host, that means virtual sites, so we can configure those virtual hosts for them, the different configuration settings, and also we can use the different document root directories. That means those different sites will have a different document root directories, so that we can store those different websites data into different directories. Those virtual hosts are typically used when it is not it is not cost effective to spin up multiple virtual machines to serve out many low traffic sites, for example in as hard hosting environment. So if you suppose you are having a very less like low traffic sites, we have not have a sites like Facebook which is getting the heavy traffics, so we don't need to create a separate virtual machine or separate web server for them. So we don't, it is not a cost effective to have a separate server, complete server, or a separate virtual machine also. Then what we can do, we can configure a single host server, we can configure different virtual sites. Now for configuring the virtual host, for configuring virtual hosts are configured using this virtual host tag. So as you see in the main configuration file, all the configurations are having like a HTML tags, directory tags, and the other tags, loading modules tag, directory tag, and log tag. So all the configurations are having these tags. So for configuring the virtual host, we need this tag for it, virtual host tag, and this blocks inside the main configuration. Or to ease the administration, what we can do, we can use this virtual host blocks are typically not defined in main configuration file. So basically we don't define this on main configuration file, so that it will be easy for us to administrator. So for every host we create the separate .conf files under this conf.d directory. This is the drop down directory where all the .conf file will be loaded. So what we can do, we can actually add the configuration for the virtual host in the main configuration file, but it will be sometime difficult to manage. So for every different site we can create different file, different conf file, or even we can create a single conf file for different websites. We can do both. Now when we go for creating the virtual host, so what we can do, we can create name based virtual sites, or we can create IP based virtual sites. So we can do name based or IP based, both virtual hosting. Now when we configure virtual hosting in two ways, like named and IP based, so by default what happened, every virtual host is an IP based virtual host. Remember, every host which we configure, every virtual host which we configure is basically the IP based virtual host. So sorting the traffic to the virtual host based on what IP address the client had connected to. So whenever client try to access any site, so web server do what? It try to check that what is the IP of the client. Like if the client is accessing from the IP 10.1.1.1, that means our server will try to find that network IP here in our virtual hosting tags. That means whatever the virtual host site we configure, it will try to match that is any host is having this IP 10.0.0.0. So it will try to respond with that. Otherwise what happens? Otherwise what happen, if there are multiple virtual hosts declared for the single IP and port combination? That means what? If we have a single IP but we have different multiple sites and we have configured a single IP, just like we are using single IP for multiple sites. So the server name and server alias directories will be consulted. That means in the virtual host block we have a directory called server name or server alias. So if the two virtual hosting configuration file has the same IP and port number, then what it will do, our server will look for the server name. That means what is the name client try to access. Client try to access www.example.com or client want to access uh, portal.example.com. So it will try to see the name, server name, and even it can have a alias also. Effectively what it do is enabling the name based virtual hosting. So by default the all virtual hosting is the IP based, so it will try to match the IP address, and if the IP address is not, it is having a same IP addresses, then it will go for server name. And by doing this it is enabling what? Name based virtual hosting. So IP based virtual hosting means we can have one IP for one site. So if we configure one site, then we need one IP for it. If we create two sites, we need two IP. Three sites, three IP. So sometimes it is difficult because having a public IP is difficult, because if you want your site can be accessed from internet, then you need what? Public IP. So having multiple public IPs are sometimes difficult. So what we can do, basically we use the same public IP, and we use on same public IP we create multiple different name sites by using the server name directory, and it is called what? Name based virtual hosting. So mostly people do what? Use name based virtual hosting. Now wildcard and priority. Wildcard and priority means what? The IP address part of this virtual host. That means when you make this virtual host tag in the directory, so in that we mention the IP address also. So it can be replaced with one of two wildcards. So instead of giving the IP address, a particular IP address, we can mention this underscore default underscore, or we can mention the star. Now both have exactly the same meaning, and that means match anything. It says match anything. Now what that means? So when a request comes HTTPD, we'll first try to match against virtual hosts that have an explicit IP address set. Explicit IP address set, that means if the request comes from 192.168.1.1, so it will try to match the same IP. Now if same IP, that means 192.168.1.1 or whatever. Now if those matches fail, then virtual host with the wildcard IP addresses are inspected. So after that fails, like if it is not matching any IP addresses, then it will go for wildcard. It will look for the wildcard. Either it is underscore default underscore or star. And if there is still no match, then the main server configuration is used. That means if there is no wildcard also and no virtual host IP also, then it will go for the default site, and that is why our default site is working by default, because we have not created any virtual hosting. Now if no exact match has been found for the server name or server alias directories, and there are multiple virtual hosts defined for the IP and port combination, the request came in on the first virtual host that matches an IP and port is used. So first, with the first being seen as the order in which virtual host for defined in the configuration file. Now here is the point, like when you have configured 3 or 4 virtual sites with the same IP and same port, so which will be accessed first? So it will be defined by the configuration file sequence under the configuration directory. And when using multiple, you can use multiple these .conf files. They will be included in alphanumerical sorting order. To create a catch-all default virtual host, the configuration file should be named something like 00default.conf to make sure that it is included before any other. As I said previously also, it goes by the alphanumerical sequence. So first it will go for the numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, so 0 to 9, then it will go for A, B, C, D. So if you want your file must load it first, then you can do what? You can add 0, you can start that file name with the 0. Now .conf, now this will be when you are having multiple different configuration file for different virtual host. Now if you want to, you can also do what? You can configure the single configuration file for multiple hosts also. Now how we'll do this? So let's create one site here first. Now for creating a virtual host, what I can do, I can add the configuration into this main configuration file. I can add it here, or I can do what? I can create a separate file under this conf.d directory like these other files. Now how the configuration will be and what are the options we can add into. So if you want to get some help or sample, then there is a file for it. Under the USR share directory, under the doc HTTP D, you have a file here which is called httpd virtualhost.conf. This is the sample file for the configuration of virtual host. So if you see this file vhost.conf, I will open the file. So you can see what you can configure for virtual host. So as you see here, so this is what the virtual host tag directory. It starts here with some options and then it ends on here with these other options, and it is using for IP address, it is using the wildcard. So it is basically using what? The wildcard here. So you can use the wildcard character or you can use the particular IP for it, and then what? You can configure this. So first it will try to match the IP address, and if it is not matching the IP address, then it will go for the wildcard and it will try to access the wildcard. This is the wildcard for the port number. Port number is default what? 80, and there is the other settings. Now this is what the sample file. So you can create your file also same like this. So what I will do here, I will create my own file. I actually copy this settings from here so that I can create my own file. So what I will do, I will create, instead of the main configuration file, I will create a new file under this conf.d directory, and I will say this is my vhost dot conf. And now here I will add my settings. And this is my first vhost. Okay, now what? For IP, I can use the IP address. Now right now I have only one IP address, that is 192.168.1.12. So I can use that IP, and if I have another IP, then I can use that other IP for my virtual host. So if I have to create the IP based virtual hosting, then I need multiple IP addresses. So I have to add multiple IP addresses first, and then based on those IP addresses I have to create the different sites, and those IP addresses I have to mention here. Now if I don't have IP addresses, multiple IP addresses, I have single IP address and I want to configure the site on the single IP address, so I can use the IP address here specifically, or I can use the wildcard character also. So I will use wildcard character here, and for the port number I will mention port 80. Now I'm using the default port. Now even I can use the different port also. Now here we have to mention the server admin. Now server admin, that means the administrator's email address. Now email address, that means I'm giving this root email address, so that any problem comes it will send the mail to this email address. Now if I don't mention this setting here for the email address, then it will use the main configuration setting. The main configuration setting says also same. So you can have different mail addresses for different sites, or it will use the global setting configured in the main configuration file. Document root directory. Now document root directory must be separated, otherwise it will go for the default, and default is what, where www.html. So I want this site should have a different document root directory. So the directory I will create, it is not there, but I am going to create it under this where www. Under this www I will create the directory, and this will be named as site1. So this is what I am going to create. Now this site will not be accessed by the IP, because I am going to create multiple sites with the same IP. So I want to have this directory here. So my sites will be accessed by this directory, the server name. So whatever the name I will mention here, this site will be accessed by that name. So I will mention the name so that we can understand. I will say like site1.example.com. Now I am not changing the domain name, I am only changing the server name here. Why? Because I don't have a other DNS configured. So if I change this domain name, then I have to configure the domain name in the DNS also. Now for the only machine name, also I have to configure the DNS server for this name also. So that I will do later. Now server alias also we can create, like this is the main name, and I can create a separate name for that server alias. Now I don't need alias, so I will remove it. Now the next thing is what? Error logs. Now this is also a good practice to have a different log for your different virtual hosts, so that what happens when you see any problem, so you can also do the troubleshoot easily when you are having a different log for the different sites. So suppose this is my site 1 error log, and this one will be my site 1's access logs. So whenever any problem comes, then I have to look for these logs. So these logs will be separated. Now what else I want to do? That's it. We don't have to have any other setting for right now. So we have configured this one site here, and that's it. Now I will go and save it. Now remember, I have to make sure this name is accessible. For that I have to change the DNS, and I have to make sure that I will create this directory, and in that directory I have to make sure our web content will be added. So first I will do what? I will create the directory mkdir under where www. I will create a directory named site1. And we have now created the directory. So the directory for the site I have created. Now we need a file for the content, web content in this directory. Now we don't have a proper website, so I will do what? I will just create the home page so that we can see it is working or not. I will do have one web page there under the default site index.html. So I will copy this one into site 1, and I will make sure that it will look different. So for that I will do some changes here. So this will be my website, and this is my testing name base site, and this site, this is my, this is site is what, site 1. This is site 1 dot example.com, and I will change the color also so we know what it is different. So for this site I will use a gray color. It is no, not gray. I will use a red color for it. Okay, so the web directory, the document root directory is created. I have created the content also. Now I have to make sure that the site name will be accessible. So for that I will add the entry for this name, site1.example.com, in our domain. Remember, whatever the name for the site you will mention, you have to make sure that name will be resolved. So according to the name, whatever you are having a name, whether you are having a different domain name and all, you have to add those name into the DNS. So I have a DNS here, so I will add new name here. That will be site 1. A, and this one is also having the same IP. So I'm using the same IP. This is the original name and this is the name, but one more name I have added here. System CTL and restart. Now first I will restart the name service so that it will be saved, and now I can restart my HTTPD service. Okay, now what? Let's try to see whether it is resolving the name or not. So dig.example.com. So it is resolving and it is giving this IP. So that's it. Now I will go to the client. So this was our default site. Now I'll go to this new tab and I will try to access the site 1. Site1.example.com. Remember, I'm not trying to access it with the IP. I'm trying to access it with the name. And when I press enter, we can see the site here and we can see this testing name based site, and this is the site for site 1. Now by using the same process, we can create multiple sites. We can create n number of sites, and those all sites will be accessed by the name. Let me give you a quick example. I will create one more site very quickly. So I'll go to the server. Now I'll use the same process. What I will do, under this, not into the main configuration file, where is this? Under this conf.d directory, we can create another file, anyname.conf, for the other site, or I can add the other setting also in the same file. So I'll do it in the same file. So this is our one site. So I will add one more site here, and I will say that this is my second site, and now I will use the same kind of setting: 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Now here again I'm using star, so it is going to be used as a default wildcard. Server admin, I will use the same because I have a same. Now I will use the different site name. This will be the different document root directory. The name will be different also. Now okay, the log file will also be different so that we can access it differently. So I have just changed some settings, like I have created the new. So the directory is new. I will create this directory and this will be the name for my site. Now you see I use the same process here. Now I will do what? I will create the directory first. So mkdir, and under where www, I will create site 2, and for this I will use another file. Now I have another file there here in site 1, so index.html, so I will use this one again. I will make sure the change, it will look different, so I will change it also, so it will look different. Site 2 index.html, so this one will be site 2, and I will change the color. Let's say it will be blue. Okay, now next we have to mention we have to make sure that it will resolve the name also. So I will go for the DNS setting, forward zone file, and I will add one more line for site 2. So this is the site 1 and this is site 2. You can have any name. Now after doing all this, I will restart the services. First I will restart the name service, then I will restart our HTTP service to update the changes. Now we can check, we can dig, and we can see that whether it is resolving the site 2 also or not. So site 2 is also resolving, that means we can access it from the client. So now I will open one more tab. Now this one is still working, you can see I am refreshing. Now I will go to other tab, and here I will say site2.example.com, and now this one is also working. So like this we can create these multiple virtual host sites. Now one more important thing, when I create these sites, so in the configuration file you can see I am using this directory. Now I am using this directory and I am not having any problem. Why? Because remember, this directory is already shared. It is already shared and it is already granted access to all. So if you want to use another directory, like if you want to create a directory somewhere else, then it will not be allowed, and it will not be allowed and it will not be accessible. And for that you have to add new directory syntax. Let me create one more site, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Now I am creating one more site. Let's say this is my third site. So this is my third site. Now what here? Now here I am using still the IP will be same. Now for the document root directory, I will create it in a different location. Let's say I will create it under directly slash. Server name will be site 3. Logs will be separated. And everything is done. Now but I have used this different name, different directory. Now complete the process first. Let's see is it accessible or not. So I will create the directory first, mkdir. Under the slash I will create site 3. Then I will copy the home file. I will create the whole index file also. I will copy it from the site 2 to site 3, and I will make sure the changes is also there. So site 3 I will change it, and this will be our site 3, and color I will use yellow. Okay, now I will make sure it will be resolved by the DNS. So I'll go to DNS forward zone file, and I will add record for site 3. So I have done what I have to done. I have done all these things right, and I will restart the services, name services and HTTP service, and I will try to resolve the name by using dig site 3, and it is also resolvable. Now when I try to access this site, This site 2 is still working. Now I will go to access site 3, site3.example.com. Now what we are seeing here is the test page. Now why we are seeing the test page? Because it is not able to access the document root directory and it is not able to access the home page. Now why it is happening? Now because by default previously we created all the files under this var directory. Now var www directory is already shared in the main configuration file. So when you check this main configuration file, so in this main configuration file, that var www directory is already shared. It is having a directory syntax already. And as you see here, it is already having this directory syntax here. And it is already having this option required all granted. So whatever directory we create inside this var www can also be accessible. But when I create the directory other than this directory, then it is not accessible to the Apache. So for that directory we have to create this directory for this directory. So basically it is stopped by two things. One, SE Linux. First it is the directory tag and the second is SE Linux also. Remember, SE Linux will also stop it because the directory will not have a tag context label as HTTP, so it will not be accessible. So you have to make sure that you have to change the label to this HTTPD also, otherwise it will not be accessible if the SE Linux is on enforcing mode. Now first I will make sure that it has the directory syntax. So here when I added this directory here, so I have to make sure that it has the directory syntax also. So here the directory syntax is opening and mentioning the original path. Then you have to mention some options, whether you want to allow overread option. I don't have this, I will say none. Or you can put options also, separate options. I will not put any option, but the main option is required all granted. Or you can just mention your domain name, your network, whatever, and then I will close this directory syntax also. So you have to make sure that you put these directory syntax there for this directory. So for this directory you have to make sure you add this directory syntax, otherwise it will not be accessible. Now I have added the syntax for the directory and have said all granted, so it will be accessible to everyone. And if your SE Linux is working, it is on enforcing mode, then you have to make sure that you will also add this label on that directory. Now that's it. Other things we don't have to do. We have already added all the other things, so I will just restart the service. And then when I check this, when I refresh this page, we can see our site. One more thing, by default it always uses this home page name as index.html. Now suppose this site home page name is different. Let me rename it. So if suppose specifically this site name is not, the home page name is not index.html, the name is home.html. Now in this case also it will not able to access the web page. Now when I refresh, it goes back to again the test page. Why? Because it is not able to access the home page. It is looking for index.html, but the name for the page is what? Home.html. Now index.html is what? It is the default directories. It is coming from the main configuration file. In the main configuration file, we have this syntax here, says that all the home page file name must be index.html. So if you don't have the file which is if you're having a file which is having a different name, so you can do what? You can put your configuration file. In your configuration file, you can put that directory here for the different name, like this. You have to put this setting here, and which says directory index for this site only will be home.html. Now if you don't mention this option with any site, then it will use what? The default one. So here we have not mentioned it, so it will use the default, and that is what? Index.html. But for this site I have mentioned home.html, so it will use this for the site. And when I restart the service, and when you try to get this, you will now get the page. So like this, you can create multiple virtual hosts for on your server. So we configure the server with the default site, then we configure it for the multiple virtual hosts, and we use the name-based virtual hosting. If you use IP, then you have to create separate IP for each site, and name-based means you can configure all the sites with only one IP. So we use this, and we have seen it like if you have created into the different document root directory, then what? You have to make sure that you have to add the directory tag into it, and also you have to make sure that your SC Linux is properly added into that, like your label for SC Linux is also added. For troubleshooting your virtual host, what is the good idea? So first, make sure that your all virtual sites must have the separate document root directory. Like we have site 1 for site 1, we have site 2 for site 2, site 3 for site 3. Then we have to configure the separate log files for all the different virtual hosts. Like what we have done, we have made sure that each site has a different log file, access log and error log both. Then to evaluate in order, virtual host definitions are passed by the HTTP. So if you create separate file for the separate sites, we have created only one file for 3 sites, but if you like, then you can create 3 files for 3 sites. So you have to make sure the alphanumerical sorting, so that it will be parsed one by one. So if you're creating multiple files, then you have to make sure that file names also be in order, which order you want to load them. Then you can, if suppose some site is not working or some problem is having, then you do what? Disable one by one each site configurations by commenting them, and after that you can see that which site is giving the problem. And also you can check the logs. For logging, we can use generalctl command to check the log, and you can mention the unit as httpd.service, so it will isolate all the logs and it will show you only the logs related to httpd services. So these are some steps of the troubleshooting which you can use to troubleshoot. So this is how we can configure the virtual hosting, and also we can see some troubleshooting also.